The courtroom was bigger than any building Han Wu had ever seen. Crystal walls stretched up so high he could not see the ceiling. Strange lights floated in the air without any support. The floor beneath his feet was smooth and cold like ice. But it did not melt. Han Wu stood in the center of it all. Heavy chains made of some glowing metal held his hands behind his back. The chains were warm against his skin and hummed with energy. He could not break them no matter how hard he tried. Around him sat hundreds of alien beings. Most of them looked like tall red lizards with forearms and burning eyes. These were the Pyrethi. Their skin glowed like hot coals and small flames danced on their shoulders and heads. When they moved, the air shimmered with heat. At the front of the room sat 5 judges. They were bigger than the other Pyrethi and their flames burned brighter. The one in the middle wore a crown made of what looked like frozen fire. His name was Velthor and he was the High Inquisitor of the Pyrothi Empire. Velthor's voice boomed through the room when he spoke. "You and Han Wu of the planet Earth, you stand accused of the greatest crime in the history of our empire. Do you understand what you have done?" Han Wu lifted his chin and looked straight at the alien judge. "I destroyed your so-called sacred flame." "Yes, I understand that." A wave of angry hisses came from the watching Pyrothi. Some of them stood up, and their flames grew bigger. Guards had to push them back into their seats. Velthar raised one of his forehands for silence. The flame of eternity burned on the world of Valkyris for 10,000 years. It was the heart of our faith, the source of our power, the gift from our fire gods. And you snuffed it out like it was nothing more than a candle. It was killing people, Han Wu said simply. Your flame was sucking the life out of every living thing on that planet. The trees were dead. The animals were gone. Even the Pyrothi colonists were getting sick. Someone had to stop it. Those colonists were blessed to give their life force to the eternal flame. Another judge spoke up. This one was smaller, but her voice was sharp like breaking glass. They were chosen by the fire gods to feed the sacred fire. You had no right to interfere. Han Wu shook his head. No god worth worshipping would ask for that kind of sacrifice. What I saw on Valkyris was not divine. It was just hungry. The room exploded with angry voices. Some Pyrathi were shouting for Han Wu to be burned right there. Others were calling him names in their own language that he did not understand, but could guess were not nice. Velthor slammed his fist on the judge's bench. Where his hand hit the crystal, it glowed white-hot for a moment. Silence. We are here to pass judgment, not to listen to the lies of this human. He stood up slowly. When he reached his full height, he was nearly twice as tall as Han Wu. The flames on his body grew until they formed a cloak of fire around him. Han Wu of Earth, the evidence against you is clear. Satellite images show you entering the Temple of Eternal Flame on Volk. Security recordings show you placing some kind of device near the sacred fire. And we all saw what happened next. Velthor waved his hand and the air above the courtroom shimmered. Suddenly Han Wu was looking at a 3-dimensional image of what had happened on Valkyris 3 days ago. The image showed a huge temple made of black stone. In the center was a pillar of blue and white fire that reached up to the sky. The flame was beautiful, but even in the recording, Han Wu could see that the ground around it was gray and lifeless. The image changed to show Han Wu sneaking through the temple halls. He watched himself avoid the guards and make his way to the central chamber. Then he saw himself pull out a small metal device and place it near the base of the flame. That device contained a chemical compound designed to disrupt the molecular structure of our sacred fire. Velthor continued. Within minutes, the flame of eternity was reduced to nothing but smoke and ash. The image showed the moment when the great flame began to flicker and die. First it turned from blue to orange to red. Then it got smaller and smaller until it was just a tiny spark. Then even that was gone. But the image also showed what happened next. As soon as the flame died, the gray, lifeless ground around the temple began to change. Green shoots pushed up through the dead soil. Trees that had been withered and brown suddenly burst into leaf. Even from space, the satellites could see the wave of new life spreading out from where the flame had been. You see, Han Wu said quietly, as soon as your flame was gone, life returned to that world. Does that not tell you something about the true nature of your so-called sacred fire? It tells us that you are a destroyer of all that is holy, Velthor replied. The fire gods made that flame as a test of faith. Those who were worthy would give their life force gladly to keep it burning. But you robbed them of that chance to prove themselves. I saved them from being slowly drained to death. Han Wu shot back. Your flame was not a gift from any god, it was a parasite. It fed on living things and gave nothing back but death. One of the other judges leaned forward. Even if that were a true human, it was not your place to make that choice. The Pyrothi, people have worshipped fire for 50,000 years. We understand its ways better than any other species in the galaxy. If we say the flame was sacred, then it was sacred. Just because something is old does not make it right, Han Wu said. On my world we have a saying, the fire that warms the hearth is the same fire that burns down the house. It all depends on how you use it. Velthar's flames flared higher. You dare to lecture us about fire? We who were born from flame, we who command the very stars to burn. Your pathetic little species discovered fire only yesterday. Compared to us, you know nothing of its true power. Maybe not, Han Wu admitted, but I know enough to tell the difference between a fire that gives life and one that takes it. Your flame on Vulcarus was taking life. That made it wrong no matter how long it had been burning. The High Inquisitor turned to the other judges. They spoke together in low voices using words that Han Wu could not understand, but he could tell from their body language that they were very angry. After several minutes, Velthar turned back to face him. We have reached our decision. Han Wu of Earth, you are guilty of the crime of destroying the flame of eternity. This is the most serious offense possible under Pyrathy law. The penalty is death, but not just any death. The High Inquisitor's eyes began to glow brighter. You will be cast into the furnace of torment. It is a realm of pure fire where the very air burns. Nothing has ever survived there for more than a few moments. It is where we send only the most evil criminals to suffer for their crimes against the fire gods. Han Wu felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his face calm. And if I refuse to go, you have no choice in the matter, Velthar said with what might have been a smile. The portal is already being prepared. You'll be thrown through whether you walk or whether you are dragged. Guards began moving toward Han Wu from all sides. They were big Pyrathy warriors with flames dancing along their armor. Each one carried a long spear with a tip that glowed like a hot coal. Any last words, human? Velthar asked. Han Wu looked around the courtroom at all the alien faces watching him. Most of them looked happy that he was about to die. A few looked curious to see what would happen. None of them looked like they cared about the truth. Just one thing, Han Wu said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You think fire is your master. You worship it and fear it and try to please it like some angry god. But you are wrong about fire. Fire has no master. It serves no one and bows to no one. Fire simply is. Paused and looked directly at Velthar. But if fire did have a master, it would be someone who truly understands what fire really is, not someone who just bows down to it. The guards grabbed Han Wu by the arms and began dragging him toward a side door. As they pulled him away, he heard Velthar's voice behind him. We shall see how well you understand fire when it is burning the flesh from your bones, human. May your suffering in the furnace of torment last for eternity. The door slammed shut and Han Wu was dragged down a long corridor toward whatever fate awaited him. But even as the guards pulled him along, he was not thinking about death. He was thinking about his grandfather and the lessons he had learned long ago about the true nature of fire. Perhaps it was time to put those lessons to the test. The guards dragged Han Wu through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were made of the same crystal as the courtroom, but these walls were darker. Red light pulsed through them like blood through veins. The air grew hotter with each step they took. Soon they reached a huge chamber with a high domed ceiling. In the center of the room was something that made Han Wu stop and stare. It was a hole in the air itself. The hole was perfectly round and about 3 times taller than a man. Through it, Han Wu could see another world. Fire was everywhere in that other world. Rivers of lava flowed like water. Mountains of burning rock reached up to a sky that was nothing but flame. The very air shimmered with heat that hurt to look at. Behold the furnace of torment, said Velthar as he entered the chamber behind them. This is where all enemies of the fire gods meet their end. No living thing has ever survived more than a few heartbeats in that realm. More Pyrathy had come to watch. They filled the chamber, and their combined flames made the air so hot that Han Wu began to sweat. But none of them came too close to the portal. Even the fire-born Pyrathy seemed afraid of what lay beyond it. How many have you thrown in there? Han Wu asked. Thousands over the centuries, Velthar replied with pride. Criminals, rebels, those who spoke against our faith. All of them screamed as the fire consumed them. All of them begged for mercy that never came. Han Wu looked at the portal again. The heat coming through it was like standing too close to a furnace. His prison clothes were already starting to smoke, but something about the flames on the other side caught his attention. They moved in patterns that seemed almost familiar. You know what I find interesting, Han Wu said. What could possibly interest you about your own death, human? Velthar asked. All those people you threw in there. Did any of them know anything about fire? I mean, really know about it. Not worship it or fear it, but actually understand how it works. Velthar's flames fled with anger. We Pyrathy are the masters of fire. We understand it better than any species in the galaxy. No, you do not, Han Wu said simply. You worship fire, but you do not understand it. There is a big difference. Explain this difference before you die. One of the other Pyrathy called out. Han Wu thought about his grandfather back on Earth. The old man had been a blacksmith in a small village. He had taught Han Wu to work metal when he was just a boy. But more than that, he had taught him to understand fire itself. My grandfather once told me something, Han Wu began. He said that most people think fire is alive. They think it has wants and needs and feelings. But fire is not alive. It is not dead either. Fire is possibility. What does that mean? Asked a Pyrathy god. Fire wants to grow and change and become something new, but it cannot do that on its own. It needs fuel and air and the right conditions. When you give fire what it needs, it will work with you. When you try to force it, or control it, or make it do things it cannot do, then it fights back. Velthar made a sound like angry laughter. Pretty words, human, but words will not save you from the flames. Guards, throw him through. The guards grabbed Han Wu by the arms and legs. They carried him toward the portal like he was a piece of cargo. The heat grew stronger with each step. Soon it was so hot that Han Wu could barely breathe. "Wait," he said. "One more thing." "What now?" Velthar demanded. "When I do not die in your furnace of torment, what will you do then?" "You will die human." "They all die. But what if I do not?" Velthar's eyes burned brighter. "Then the fire gods themselves will bow before the Pirathi Empire." "But that will never happen." The guards reached the edge of the portal. Han Wu could feel the heat trying to set his clothes on fire. The flames on the other side seemed to dance and reach toward him like curious animals. "Goodbye, human," Velthar said. "May your suffering be brief." The guards threw Han Wu through the portal. The sensation was like being hit by lightning and thrown into an oven at the same time. Han Wu tumbled through burning air and crashed onto a surface of black volcanic glass. The impact knocked the wind out of him and scraped skin from his hands and knees. He lay there for a moment trying to catch his breath. The air was so hot it hurt to breathe. His prison uniform immediately caught fire. The flames spread across the cloth like they were hungry for it. Han Wu rolled over and tried to pat out the fire, but there was fire everywhere. The ground beneath him was hot enough to cook meat. Rivers of lava flowed past him on both sides. The sky above was nothing but flame and smoke. This was definitely a place where nothing was supposed to live, but as Han Wu lay there, something strange happened. The flames that were burning his clothes seemed to slow down. Instead of consuming the fabric quickly, they began to move more carefully, almost like they were being cautious. Han Wu remembered what his grandfather had taught him about working with fire in the forge. Do not fight the flames. Do not try to force them. Instead, work with them. Give them what they need, and they will give you what you need. He stopped trying to pat out the fire on his clothes. Instead, he lay very still and spoke to the flames like his grandfather had taught him. "I am not your enemy," he said quietly. "I do not want to fight you. I just want to understand you." The flames on his shirt flickered and changed color. Instead of the angry orange of destroying fire, they turned to the softer yellow of a hearth fire. The heat was still there, but it felt warm instead of painful. Han Wu sat up slowly. Around him, the landscape of the furnace of torment stretched in all directions. Mountains of burning stone rose like giant teeth. Lakes of molten rock bubbled and steamed. But now that he was not fighting the heat, he could see other things too. There were shapes scattered across the burning ground. Most of them looked like statues made of crystal or glass. But as Han Wu got closer, he realized what they really were. These were the remains of all the other prisoners who had been thrown into this place over the centuries. The heat had been so intense that it had turned their bodies into glass. Some still had faces frozen in expressions of terror. Others had been melted beyond recognition. It was a graveyard of Velthar's enemies, but as Han Wu walked among the crystal corpses, he found something that made him stop. One of the figures was not completely turned to glass. It was a Pirathi warrior who was still partly alive. The alien was badly burned and his flames were very weak, but his eyes were open and aware. When he saw Han Wu walking toward him without being consumed by fire, those eyes went wide with shock. "How?" the Pirathi whispered. His voice was barely audible over the sound of crackling flames. "I am not fighting the fire," Han Wu explained. "I am working with it instead." "That is impossible. Fire cannot be reasoned with. It can only be worshipped or feared." Han Wu knelt down beside the dying alien. The ground was so hot it should have burned through his knees, but somehow it did not. The flames around him continued to burn in that soft yellow color. "What is your name?" Han Wu asked Kethmer. "I was a warrior of the 3rd Legion until I spoke against the High Inquisitor. I have been dying in this place for days." "Well, Kethmer, I think it is time you stopped dying and started living." Han Wu reached out toward the flames that were slowly consuming the alien warrior. Instead of trying to put them out, he spoke to them the same way he had spoken to the fire on his own clothes. "He is not your enemy either," Han Wu said to the flames. "He is just someone who needs help." The fire around Kethmer began to change. The angry red flames that were eating at his flesh turned to the same soft yellow that surrounded Han Wu. The pain in the alien's eyes faded and was replaced by wonder. "How are you doing this?" Kethmer asked. "My grandfather taught me that fire is not our master or our enemy. Fire is our partner. It will work with us if we treat it with respect instead of fear." Han Wu helped Kethmer sit up. The alien was still badly burned, but he was no longer dying. Around them, the landscape of eternal torment continued to burn and bubble. But for the first time in the history of the furnace of torment, 2 living beings sat talking instead of screaming. "The High Inquisitor will not believe this," Kethmer said. "Then maybe it is time he learned something new about fire," Han Wu replied. Far above them in the crystal chamber, Velthar and his followers waited for the human screams to echo through the portal. But no screams came, only silence. And in that silence something began to change in the furnace of torment that would shake the foundations of the Pirathi Empire. News traveled fast through the Pirathi Empire. In prison ships and detention centers across the galaxy, whispers spread about the impossible thing that had happened. The human who was thrown into the furnace of torment had not died. Instead, he had somehow made the fire obey him on the prison ship. Dark Star Intelligence Officer Yoon-hei heard the rumors from other human prisoners. She had worked with Han-woo for 3 years before they were both captured during a rescue mission on Pyrathi space. She knew him better than anyone else in their unit. "It has to be a lie," said Park Jin, an engineer who had been captured with them. "No one can control fire like that. The Pyrathi have been trying for thousands of years and they can barely do it." "Han-woo is different," Yoon-hei said quietly. "His grandfather taught him things about fire that most people do not know. Old Earth knowledge from before we had machines to do everything for us." "Like what?" asked Kim Da-yoon, the unit medic. "He told me once that his grandfather could make fire burn hotter or cooler just by how he fed it. He could make flames that would melt steel or flames that would barely warm your hands, all with the same basic fire." Park Jin shook his head. "That is just controlling the fuel and airflow. Any blacksmith knows those tricks." "Maybe," Yoon-hei said, "but Han-woo always said it was more than that. He said fire had moods and personalities. He talked to it like it was alive." In the furnace of torment, Han-woo was learning just how right his grandfather had been. The fire in this dimension was different from normal fire. It was older and stronger and more aware, but it still responded to the same basic approach. He had found a small cave behind a wall of cooled lava rock. The heat was less intense there, and it gave him and Kethma a place to rest and talk. The Pyrathi warrior was healing faster than should have been possible. The gentle flames that now surrounded him seemed to be helping his body repair itself. "I do not understand how you do it," Kethma said for the 10th time. "All my life I was taught that fire is a god that must be worshipped. We make sacrifices to please it. We build temples to honor it. We never dare to speak to it as an equal." "That is your first mistake," Han-woo explained. "Fire is not a god. It is a force of nature like wind or water. You would not worship the wind, would you? You would learn to work with it. Sailors use the wind to move their ships. They do not pray to it, they understand it." Kethma touched one of the healing burns on his arm. The flame that danced there was warm and soothing instead of painful. "But surely fire is different. It has power that wind and water do not have." "Fire has the power to change things," Han-woo agreed. "But so does water. Water can carve canyons through solid rock if you give it enough time. Fire can turn sand into glass or iron into steel. Both are just tools that can create or destroy depending on how you use them." As they talked, Han-woo continued to experiment with his growing abilities. He found that he could shape the flames around him into different forms. Sometimes they became shields that protected him from the intense heat of lava flows. Sometimes they became tools that helped him cut through solid rock. The most amazing discovery was that he could make the fire cooler without making it smaller. By speaking to the flames and asking them gently to burn differently, he could create fire that gave light and warmth without the destroying heat. It was something that even the most skilled Pyrathi fire priests had never achieved. "Watch this," Han-woo said to Kethma. He held out his hand and a small flame appeared in his palm. But this flame was different from any fire the Pyrathi had ever seen. It was bright blue and it cast no heat at all. Kethma could put his hand right next to it and feel nothing but a gentle warmth. "How is that possible?" Kethma whispered. "I asked it to burn cold," Han-woo said simply. "Fire wants to please if you ask it nicely instead of trying to force it." Meanwhile, in the crystal chamber above them, Velthor was having problems. The portal to the furnace of torment was supposed to close automatically after a prisoner was thrown through, but for some reason it was staying open. Even worse, the portal was starting to change. Usually the portal showed nothing but flames and destruction. But now there were moments when Velthor could see two figures sitting calmly in the burning landscape. One was clearly the human, the other looked like a Pyrathi warrior. "That is impossible," Velthor said to his advisors. "No Pyrathi has been thrown into the furnace for months. How can there be one of our people in there?" "Perhaps it is one of the old prisoners," suggested an aide. "Someone who was cast in long ago but somehow survived." "No one survives the furnace," Velthor snapped. "That is the whole point. It is supposed to be instant death, but the evidence was right in front of him." Through the portal he could see the human and the Pyrathi talking like old friends. Worse yet, the human seemed to be surrounded by flames that moved and danced at his command. Word of this impossible sight began to spread beyond the chamber. Pyrathi soldiers and priests came to see for themselves. Soon there was a crowd gathered around the portal, all staring in shock at what they were seeing. "He is using forbidden magic," one priest declared. "This human has made a deal with dark powers. Or maybe," said a younger priest quietly, "he knows something about fire that we do not." This suggestion caused an uproar. Several older priests began shouting that such thinking was blasphemy, but other younger Pyrathi looked thoughtful. They had always wondered why their fire magic was so limited compared to what the ancient texts described. The argument grew louder until Velthor was forced to clear the chamber, but he could not clear his own doubts. Deep in his mind a question was growing. What if the human was right? What if the Pyrathi had been approaching fire all wrong for thousands of years? Back in the furnace, Han-woo was discovering that his connection to the fire was growing stronger. He could now sense flames that were very far away. Not just the fire in the dimension around him, but fire throughout the galaxy. Every candle, every engine, every star was like a distant voice calling to him. "Can feel the fire on your home world," he told Keth. "There are millions of flames burning in your cities right now. Some are happy and some are angry and some are just tired." "Fire does not have emotions," Kethma protested, but his voice was uncertain. "Does it not? Think about the last time you saw a really good fire in a fireplace. Did it not seem content and peaceful? Now think about a wildfire burning out of control. Did that not seem angry and hungry?" Kethma was quiet for a long time. "I never thought about it that way," he admitted finally. "Most people do not," Hanwoo said. "They see fire as just a thing instead of something with its own nature. But once you start to understand that nature, you can work with it instead of against it." To prove his point, Hanwoo reached out to a nearby river of lava. Instead of trying to stop the flow or cool it down, he simply asked it to change direction slightly. The molten rock began to curve away from their cave, creating a safer path they could use to explore more of the dimension. "The fire priests of my people have studied for centuries to achieve even a fraction of what you just did," Kethma said in amazement. "That is because they are trying to control fire instead of partnering with it," Hanwoo explained. "Control requires force, and fire does not like to be forced. But partnership requires understanding and respect. Fire responds well to both of those things." As the days passed in the furnace of torment, Hanwoo's abilities continued to grow. He found that he could create flames that burned underwater and flames that froze things solid instead of heating them. He could make fire that healed wounds and fire that could cut through any material. But the most important thing he learned was that fire in this dimension was connected to fire everywhere else. Every flame in the galaxy was part of a vast network that he was slowly learning to access. And through that network, he began to sense something that worried him. The Piracy Empire was planning something big, something that involved gathering all their war fleets in one place and using their most powerful weapons. They were planning to destroy the Furnace of Torment completely. Even if it meant tearing a hole in space itself, they would not allow a human to master their sacred element. Hanwoo looked at Kethma, who was now almost completely healed. The Piracy warrior had become his first student in the true nature of fire. But soon they would both need to become something more. They would need to become teachers for an entire galaxy that had forgotten what fire really was. On the prison ship, Darkstar Yunhei was working on a plan that seemed impossible. She had to escape from one of the most secure ships in the Piracy fleet, steal a transport, and somehow reach the Furnace of Torment before the Empire destroyed it completely. "This is insane," Park Jin whispered as they huddled in their cell. "Even if we could take over the ship, we do not know how to operate Piracy technology." "I have been watching the guards for weeks," Yunhei replied quietly. "Their systems are not that different from ours. Besides, we have Kim Dae-yoon. She is good with electronics." The medic looked up from where she was pretending to sleep. "I can probably figure out the basic controls. But what about weapons? This ship has enough firepower to destroy a small moon." "We do not need weapons," Yunhei said. "We just need to get close enough to the portal to warn Hanwoo. He needs to know what they are planning." What the Piracy Empire was planning was bigger than just destroying one dimension. Intelligence reports that had leaked through the prison network spoke of a gathering of every war fleet in the Empire. Hundreds of massive ships all converging on the location of the furnace portal. Their plan was simple and terrible. They would focus the power of every fusion reactor in their fleet into one concentrated beam. The energy would be enough to tear apart the fabric of space-time itself. The Furnace of Torment would be erased from existence along with everything in it. High Inquisitor Velthor had convinced the Piracy High Council that this was necessary. He argued that allowing a human to master fire magic would destroy the foundation of their entire civilization. Better to lose one sacred dimension than to let their people lose faith in everything they believed. But there were Piracy who disagreed. Young priests and scholars had been talking quietly among themselves about what they had seen through the portal. The humans' abilities were beyond anything in their holy books. Maybe it was time to admit that their understanding of fire was incomplete, that these doubts had reached even the highest levels of Piracy society. Admiral Zektul, commander of the Third Fleet, had sent a secret message to other fleet commanders questioning the wisdom of Velthor's plan. "We have worshipped fire for 50,000 years, his message read. "But in all that time, have we ever, if seen anyone do what this human can do? Perhaps instead of destroying him, we should be trying to learn from him." Unfortunately for Admiral Zektul, Velthor's spies intercepted the message. Within hours, the admiral was arrested for treason and his fleet was placed under the command of more loyal officers. The message was clear to anyone who might have similar doubts. Support the High Inquisitor's plan or face the same fate as the Admiral. In the Furnace of Torment, Hanwoo could sense the growing military presence outside the dimension. Through his connection to fire throughout the galaxy, he could feel the fusion reactors of hundreds of ships gathering in one location. "They are planning something big," he told Kethma. "I can feel the power building. It is like standing next to a dam that is about to burst." The Piracy warrior nodded grimly. "Velthor will not allow his authority to be questioned. If you have truly mastered fire magic, then everything our people believe is wrong. He cannot let that happen, so he will destroy this entire dimension. To stop me, he will destroy the galaxy if he has to, Kethmer said. The High Inquisitor believes that our faith in the fire gods is more important than any individual life, even millions of individual lives. Han Wu thought about this as he practiced his growing abilities. He had learned to create flames that could burn in the vacuum of space and flames that could exist without any fuel at all. But could he create flames that were strong enough to stop an entire battle fleet? More importantly, did he want to? Han Wu had never wanted to be a warrior. He had joined the intelligence service to help people, not to fight wars, but sometimes protecting people meant standing up to those who would harm them. As he pondered this question, Han Wu became aware of something new in his fire set. There was a presence in the deepest part of the furnace dimension, something vast and ancient that had been watching him since he first arrived. There is something else here, he told Kethmer, something old and powerful. It has been hiding in the center of this realm. What kind of something? Kethmer asked nervously. I think it might be the source of all the fire in this dimension, maybe the source of all fire magic everywhere. Han Wu began walking toward the center of the furnace of torment. The heat grew more intense with every step, but his flame shield protected him. Kethmer followed close behind, still amazed that he could survive in a place that had killed thousands of his people. As they walked deeper into the burning landscape, the terrain began to change. The rivers of lava became wider and faster. The mountains of volcanic glass grew taller and sharper. The very air seemed to thicken with power. Finally, they reached the heart of the dimension. It was a vast crater filled with fire that burned every color Han Wu had ever seen, and several he had not. But this fire was different from everything else in the furnace. It moved with intelligence and purpose. It was definitely alive. As Han Wu approached the edge of the crater, the fire began to rise up from the depths. It formed itself into a shape that was almost like a giant person made entirely of flame. When it spoke, its voice was like the sound of 1,000 campfires crackling at once. The fire being said, "You are the one who speaks to my children as equals instead of trying to command them." Your children? Han Wu asked. Every flame in this dimension, every flame in your galaxy, every flame that has ever burned anywhere, they are all part of me and I am part of them. Kethmer fell to his knees. The prime flame, he whispered, the source of all fire magic. Our most sacred texts speak of you, but no one believed you were real. The being turned its attention to the Pyrothi warrior. Your people have disappointed me greatly. For thousands of years they have claimed to worship fire, but they have never tried to understand it. They demand power without wisdom. They want control without partnership. But this human is different, it continued, looking back at Han Wu. He treats fire as a friend instead of a slave. He asks instead of demanding. He listens instead of commanding. I learned from my grandfather, Han Wu said simply. He taught me that fire wants to help if you approach it with respect. Your grandfather was wise. There have been few like him in the history of your species, but you have the potential to be even greater. The prime flame began to circle around Han Wu like a living tornado of fire, but instead of burning him, it seemed to be examining him carefully. I have been waiting for someone like you for a very long time, it said finally. Someone who could truly partner with fire instead of trying to dominate it. But such partnership comes with responsibility. What kind of responsibility? Han Wu asked. The ability to speak for fire throughout the galaxy, to teach others what fire really is, to stand against those who would abuse or misuse the gift of flame. Han Wu thought about the Pyrothi fleet gathering outside the dimension, like Vel and his followers, exactly like them. They plan to destroy this entire dimension rather than admit they have been wrong about fire for centuries. Their attack will not only kill you and your friend, it will create a chain reaction that fire across multiple star systems. How many people would die? Billions. Every world that depends on fire for warmth, light, or energy would freeze and die. It would be one of the greatest disasters in galactic history. Kethmer stood up slowly. I cannot let that happen. Those are my people out there, but they are about to commit genocide. I have to try to stop them. We have to try to stop them, Han Wu corrected. This is bigger than just human or Pyrothi now. This is about protecting everyone. The prime flame seemed pleased by this response. Then you accept the partnership I offer. You will become the first fire speaker in 10,000 years. Han Wu looked around the burning crater at the heart of the furnace dimension. He thought about his grandfather and the lessons he had learned in the old man's forge. He thought about Yunhei and his other friends who were probably trying to rescue him right now. He thought about all the innocent people who would die if Velthar's plan succeeded. I accept, he said. The prime flame rushed toward him like a tidal wave of fire. But instead of burning Han Wu, it merged with him, becoming part of his very being. Power flowed through him like nothing he had ever felt before. He could sense every flame in the galaxy as clearly as if they were all in the same room. But more than that, he could speak to them. He could ask them for help, and they would listen. Fire throughout the cosmos would answer his call if he truly needed them. Now, said the voice of the prime flame from inside his mind, let us see what your people's rescue attempt looks like. And then let us prepare to show the Pyrothi Empire what fire can really do when it chooses to fight back. Han Wu smiled. Grimly, Velthar thought he was destroying a dangerous human. Instead, he was about to face something that no Pyrathy had ever encountered before, a fire speaker with the power of every flame in the galaxy behind him. The Pyrathy war fleet filled space around the portal station like a swarm of angry metal insects. 500 ships of every size and type floated in perfect formation. From tiny fighters to massive dreadnoughts that could destroy entire planets, they all pointed their weapons at one small portal in space. High Inquisitor Velthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Burning Sword. Through the main viewer he could see the portal to the Furnace of Torment. It still showed the impossible sight of two figures sitting calmly in the middle of a burning hell. "All ships report, ready, High Inquisitor," announced his weapons officer. "Every fusion reactor in the fleet is charged to maximum power. We can fire on your command." "Excellent," Velthor replied. "Today we will show the galaxy that no one can challenge the power of the Pyrathi Empire. Not even someone who claims to command fire itself." But not everyone in the fleet was eager for the coming battle. On the bridge of the cruiser Firelance, Captain Mordick watched the portal with growing doubt. He had served in the Pyrathi Navy for 30 years and had never seen anything like what the human was doing. "Sir," his science officer reported, "I am detecting unusual energy readings from the portal. The dimensional barrier is becoming unstable." "Unstable how?" Captain Mordick asked. "It appears to be expanding. The portal is slowly getting larger." This was true. What had started as a hole barely wide enough for one person was now large enough for a small ship to pass through, and it was still growing. On the prison ship Darkstar, Yoon-hae's escape plan was finally ready. She and her team had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Park Jin had figured out how to overload the ship's power grid. Kim Dae-yoon had modified several medical devices to work as weapons, and Yoon-hae had studied the guard rotations until she knew them better than the guards themselves. "Remember," she whispered to her team as they prepared to move, "we only get one chance at this. If we fail, Han-woo dies and probably half the galaxy with him." "No pressure," Park Jin muttered, but he was already working on the power grid access panel. The plan was simple but dangerous. They would cause a ship-wide power failure that would open all the cell doors automatically. In the confusion, they would fight their way to the shuttle bay and steal a transport ship. Then they would race to the portal station and try to warn Han-woo about the incoming attack. It was a plan with about 1,000 ways to go wrong and only one way to succeed, but it was the only plan they had. Park Jin finished his work on the power grid. "Ready," he reported. "Do it," Yoon-hae ordered. The lights went out throughout the Dark Star. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, but by then it was too late. Every cell door in the prison section had opened, and hundreds of prisoners were pouring into the corridors. Most of them were not human. There were rebels and criminals from dozens of different species, all united by their hatred of the Pyrathi Empire. When they saw the chance for freedom, they took it without hesitation. In the chaos that followed, Yoon-hae and her team fought their way through battles between prisoners and guards. They reached the shuttle bay just as the ship's captain was ordering all available security forces to converge on their location. There, Kim Dae-yoon pointed to a small transport ship. "That one looks fast." They ran for the ship while laser bolts flew around them. Park Jin managed to get the engine started while Yoon-hae and Kim Dae-yoon held off the pursuing guards. Within minutes, they were flying away from the Dark Star at maximum speed. "Where to park?" Jin asked from the pilot's seat. "The portal station," Yoon-hae replied. "And pray we are not too late." In the Furnace of Torment, Han-woo could feel the massive buildup of energy outside the dimension. The prime flame's power flowed through him like electricity through a wire. He could sense every flame on every ship in the Pyrathi fleet. He could feel their fusion reactors building toward the moment when they would all fire at once. "They have enough power to tear a hole in space itself," he told Kethma. "When they fire, it will not just destroy this dimension. It will create a chain reaction that spreads through multiple star systems." "How do we stop them?" Kethma asked. "We show them what fire can really do when it chooses to fight back." Han-woo reached out through his connection to the prime flame. He could feel fire burning on millions of worlds throughout the galaxy. Every candle, every engine, every star was part of the vast network that he could now access. But he did not want to use that power to destroy. Despite everything that had happened, he still believed there had to be a better way. "I am going to try something," he told Kethma. "I am going to speak to every flame in the Pyrathi fleet at the same time. Maybe I can make them understand what they are really doing." "Can you do that?" "I do not know, but I have to try." Han-woo closed his eyes and reached out with his mind. Through the network of fire that connected all things, he found the flames burning in the engines and reactors of the Pyrathi fleet. There were thousands of them, all burning with the same angry intensity as their creators. But when Han-woo spoke to them, his voice was calm and gentle. "I know you have been told that I am your enemy," he said to the flames, "but I am not. I am someone who understands what you really are. You are not weapons or tools or sources of power to be used up and thrown away. You are living energy that deserves respect and partnership." The flames throughout the fleet began to respond. Instead of burning with the harsh intensity that the Pyrathi demanded, they started to burn more gently. Engine fires that had been roaring like angry beasts became quiet and peaceful. Reactor flames that had been straining to produce maximum power relaxed, and began burning more efficiently. On the bridge of the burning sword, alarms began sounding everywhere. "What is happening?" Velther demanded. "All ships are reporting the same problem," the communications officer replied. "Their engines and reactors are operating at reduced power, but there is nothing wrong with the equipment. The fires are just burning differently." "That is impossible," the human whispered the science officer. "He is speaking to the fire in our ships. He is turning our own flames against us." Velthor's rage burned brighter than ever. "Then we fire now before he can do any more damage. All ships target the portal and fire everything you have." But when the weapons officer tried to activate the ship's main guns, nothing happened. The targeting systems were working perfectly. The weapons were fully charged, but the fire that powered them was no longer willing to be used for destruction. All across the fleet the same thing was happening. Every ship found that their weapons would not fire. The flames that powered them had become passive and gentle, unsuitable for warfare. "This is impossible," Velther raged. "Fire obeys the Purathi. We are its masters." "No," said a voice from behind him. "You are not." Velther turned to see Captain Mordick standing in the doorway of the bridge. The younger officer's flames were burning with a different color than usual. Instead of the angry red of Pirathi military fire, his flames were the softer yellow of a hearth fire. "Captain Mordick, return to your station immediately," Velthar ordered. "I cannot do that, High Inquisitor. What you are planning is wrong. The human has shown us something about fire that we never understood. Instead of trying to destroy him, we should be trying to learn from him." "You are speaking treason." "I am speaking the truth. Look around you. Every fire in this fleet is now burning peacefully because the human asked them to. When did any of our fire priests ever achieve something like that?" More officers were entering the bridge. Many of them had the same gentle flames as Captain Mordick. Word of what was happening had spread throughout the ship, and many of the crew were beginning to question everything they had been taught about fire. "The human is not our enemy," one of them said. "He is trying to teach us something. He is a destroyer of our faith," Velther replied. "He must be stopped." But even as he spoke, Velther could feel his own flames changing. The angry fire that had burned in his heart for so long was becoming quieter and more thoughtful. The human's influence was reaching even him through the portal. Han Wu could sense the change spreading through the Pirathi fleet. The flames that had been prepared for war were now burning for peace. It was working better than he had hoped. But then he sensed something else. A small ship was approaching the fleet at high speed. It was flying directly toward the portal station despite the danger. "Someone is coming," he told Kethma. "Someone who wants to help." Who could it be? Han Wu smiled as he recognized the minds aboard the approaching ship. "My friends, they came to rescue me. Can they get through the fleet? They will not have to watch." Han Wu reached out once more to the flames throughout the Pirathi fleet. But this time, instead of asking them to be peaceful, he asked them to be helpful. "My friends are coming," he told the fires. "They are trying to save lives just like I am. Please help them get through safely." The response was immediate. Throughout the fleet, ships began moving aside to create a clear path to the portal station. It was as if the flames themselves were guiding the small transport ship to safety. On the bridge of the burning sword, Velthar watched in horror as his perfectly organized battle formation dissolved into chaos. Ships were moving out of position without orders. His own crew was questioning his commands. And worst of all, he could feel his own certainty beginning to crumble. Maybe the human was right. Maybe the Pirathi had been wrong about fire for thousands of years. But admitting that would mean admitting that his entire life had been built on a lie. And High Inquisitor, Velthar was not ready to do that. Not yet. Yunhei's stolen transport ship flew through the Pirathi fleet like a leaf on the wind. All around them, massive warships were moving aside to create a clear path. It was the strangest thing any of them had ever seen. "They're letting us through," Park Jin said in amazement. "A whole battle fleet is just getting out of our way," Hanwoo Yunhei whispered. "This has to be his doing somehow." They reached the portal station without firing a single shot. The transport ship settled onto the landing platform just as the portal itself began to change again. It was now large enough for a person to walk through easily, and it was growing more stable by the minute. "There," Kim Dayun pointed through the portal. "I can see them." Han Wu and Kethma were walking toward the portal from the other side. But something was different about Han Wu. He seemed to glow with an inner light, and the air around him shimmered with heat that somehow felt welcoming instead of dangerous as he stepped through the portal onto the station platform. The temperature around them rose, but it was like stepping into a warm bath instead of an oven. The flames that danced around Han Wu's body moved like living things, but they did not burn anything they touched. "You came," he said simply as he embraced Yunhei. "Of course we came. We could not leave you in that place." "That place taught me something very important," Han Wu replied. "It taught me what fire really is, and what it can do when it is treated as a partner instead of a tool." Kethma stepped through the portal behind him. The Pirathi warrior looked completely different from when he had been thrown into the furnace weeks ago. His burns were healed, and his own flames burned with the same gentle warmth as Han Wu's. "Your friend has become something new," Kethma told the humans. "He is the first fire speaker in 10,000 years." The flames themselves have chosen him as their voice. What does that mean? Park Jin asked. Before Han Wu could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the station. On the main display screen they could see the piracy fleet was moving again, but they were not running away or preparing to attack. They were coming closer. Velthor is making his final move, Kethmer said grimly. He cannot accept that everything he believes is wrong. He will try to destroy the portal with his flagship, even if it means destroying himself as well. Through the view screen they could see the massive dreadnought burning sword breaking away from the fleet. The ship was accelerating directly toward the portal station on what looked like a collision course. He is going to ram us, Yunhei said. No, Han Wu replied calmly. He is going to learn. Han Wu walked to the center of the station platform and raised his hands. The flames around his body grew brighter, but they still gave off that strange welcoming warmth. Through his connection to the prime flame, he reached out to every fire burning throughout the galaxy. What happened next would be talked about for centuries. Every flame on every world in dozens of star systems suddenly blazed higher and brighter. From tiny candles in distant homes to the fusion fires in the hearts of stars, they all responded to Han Wu's call. The network of fire that connected all things began to glow with visible energy. On planets throughout the galaxy, people stopped what they were doing and stared at fires that had suddenly become more alive than they had ever seen before. Scientists, I scrambled to understand readings that showed impossible energy levels. Even species that had never heard of the pyrothi or their fire magic could feel that something fundamental had changed in the universe. The burning sword was only minutes away from impact when something extraordinary happened. The ship's engines began to change. Instead of the harsh military flames that had always powered pyrothi warships, gentle hearth fires appeared throughout the vessel. These new flames did not burn less powerfully. In fact, they burned more efficiently than the old fires ever had. What they burned with purpose and intelligence instead of raw destructive force. The ship's weapon systems went completely offline. The fusion reactors that had been building toward a final devastating attack suddenly became sources of warmth and light instead of weapons of war. On the bridge of the burning sword, Velthar watched his instruments with growing horror. Every system on his ship was still working perfectly, but the fire that powered them was no longer responding to his commands. High Inquisitor, his weapons officer, reported, all weapon systems are not functional. The targeting computers work, but the fire will not burn hot enough to power the guns. Engineering reports the same problem, added another officer. The engines are running, but they will only provide life support and basic propulsion. They refuse to go to ramming speed. Velthor tried to activate the ship's self-destruct system. If he could not destroy the portal with weapons or by ramming it, then he would destroy it with the explosion of his own ship. But even that system would not respond. The fires that should have caused the fusion reactors to overload simply would not burn in a destructive way. This is impossible, Velthor raged. Fire obeys the pyrothi, we command it. No, said a familiar voice from the communication system. You never commanded it. You only enslaved it. Han Wu's image appeared on the main screen, but this was not the same human who had been thrown into the furnace of torment weeks ago. This Han Wu seemed to be made of living flame himself. Fire danced around him like loyal pets and his eyes glowed with inner light. Fire is not your servant, Velthor, Han Wu continued. It never was. Fire is a partner that will work with you if you treat it with respect. But you and your people have spent thousands of years trying to force fire to do things it does not want to do. We are the masters of fire, Velthar protested. Our whole civilization is built on that truth. Your whole civilization is built on a lie, Han Wu replied gently. But it does not have to stay that way. Fire wants to help you. It always has. You just need to learn to ask instead of demanding. To prove his point, Han Wu reached out through the communication system itself. The screens and control panels throughout the burning sword began to glow with the same gentle warmth that surrounded him. But instead of burning or damaging the equipment, the fire seemed to make everything work better. Velthor watched his bridge instruments come alive with readings he had never seen before. The ship's sensors were detecting energy patterns that should have been impossible. The communication systems were picking up signals from across the galaxy. Even the artificial gravity seemed lighter and more comfortable. What are you doing to my ship? Velthor demanded. I am showing your fire what it could be if you stopped trying to control it, Han Wu answered. Fire wants to create and nurture and help. When you force it to only destroy and consume, you are wasting most of its potential. Around the bridge, Velthar's crew was staring at their instruments in wonder. Many of them had never seen their equipment work so smoothly. The harsh, red lighting that had always filled pyrothi ships was now a warm golden glow that was easier on the eyes. This is some kind of trick, Velthor said, but his voice lacked conviction. No trick, Han Wu replied. Just truth. Would you like to see more? Without waiting for an answer, Han Wu extended his influence throughout the entire pyrothi fleet. On hundreds of ships, thousands of fires suddenly began burning with new purpose. Engines that had always been loud and rough became quiet and smooth. Weapons that had been designed only for destruction began converting themselves into tools for construction and repair. Most amazing of all, the fires began to communicate directly with their pyrothi operators. For the first time in their history, The fire-worshipping Pyrethy could actually hear what fire was trying to tell them. The messages were simple but profound. The fire had never wanted to be used for war. It had always wanted to help the Pyrethy build and create and grow. But for thousands of years it had been forced to burn in ways that went against its nature. Now, finally, it was free to burn the way it was meant to burn. Captain Mordick was the first to understand what was happening. On the bridge of his cruiser, he knelt down and spoke directly to the gentle flames that now danced around the ship's controls. "I am sorry," he said simply. "We did not know. We thought we were honoring you by making you into weapons, but we were hurting you instead." The flames pulsed brighter for a moment, as if accepting his apology. Then they began to show him things he had never imagined. Images of what Pyrethy ships could become if they were designed to work with fire instead of forcing it. Visions of cities that burned with eternal flames that warmed instead of destroyed. Dreams of a civilization built on partnership instead of domination. Similar scenes were playing out on ships throughout the fleet. Pyrethy officers and crew members were speaking to their fires for the first time, and the fires were speaking back, sharing thousands of years of suppressed wisdom and creativity. On the portal station, Yunhei and her team watched the transformation of the Pyrethy fleet with amazement. "I have never seen anything like this," Kim Dayun whispered. "It is like watching an entire civilization discover fire for the first time." "In a way they are," Han Wu replied. He was still glowing with the power of the prime flame, but his voice was completely human. The Pyrethy had been using fire for 50,000 years, but they never really understood it. They saw it as a force to be controlled instead of a partner to work with. "What happens now?" Yunhei asked. "Now we build something new," Han Wu said. "A galaxy where fire is treated as it should be, where the partnership between flame and flesh creates wonders instead of weapons." On the burning sword, Velthar stood alone on his bridge as his crew gathered around the gentle fires that now filled their ship. He was the last holdout, the final voice of the old ways. But even he could feel his certainty crumbling as he watched. His people discovered truths that shattered everything he had taught them. "You have destroyed us," he said to Han Wu's image on the screen. "No," Han Wu replied. "I have given you a chance to become something better. The choice of what to do with that chance is yours." Velthar looked around his bridge at fires that burned with intelligence and purpose. For the first time in his life, he tried speaking to them as equals instead of commanding them as tools. "What do you want from me?" he asked the flames. The answer came not in words but in feelings and images. The fire showed him a vision of what he could become, not the High Inquisitor of a warrior empire built on enslaved flame, but a teacher who helped others learn to partner with fire. Someone who used his knowledge and authority to heal instead of harm. It was a future that terrified and attracted him in equal measure. Months later, representatives from across the galaxy gathered on a neutral space station to witness something unprecedented. The Pyrethy Empire, which had been the most feared military power in known space, was signing a treaty of partnership with the human colonies. But this was not a treaty between conquerors and conquered. It was an agreement between equals who had learned to see each other as partners instead of enemies. Han Wu stood before the assembled delegates, no longer glowing with visible fire but somehow still radiating warmth and calm. Beside him stood Kethma, now serving as the first Pyrethy ambassador to the human worlds, and next to them both stood Velthar, his flames burning with the gentle light of a teacher instead of the harsh glare of a warrior. "Today marks the beginning of a new age," Han Wu told the gathered representatives. "An age where we work with the forces of nature instead of trying to dominate them, where fire serves life instead of death, where partnership replaces conquest." He looked out at the sea of faces, human and alien alike, all watching him with hope and curiosity. "My grandfather once told me that the best fires are the ones that bring people together around a hearth instead of driving them apart with weapons. Today we light such a fire. May it burn for all the generations to come." The human who was meant to perish in the furnace of torment had instead become the spark that ignited a new era of cooperation across the galaxy. And as the representatives signed the treaty that would reshape the balance of power among the stars, every flame in the galaxy burned just a little brighter. Fire had found its voice at last, and that voice spoke of hope.